Ditransitive verb phrases often have an alternative form with a prepositional phrase in place of the first noun phrase, as in he gave his cat to Sally. Dog-me approach, an approach to teaching that is learner-focused and not driven by the resources available, including course books. It says that if learners are not interested, they will not learn, and therefore all material should be generated by the learners and the lessons directed by them, rather than by the teacher. Dominant culture or language, the established language, religion, behavior, values, rituals, and social customs, in other words, normal society as a whole. Dominate in a phrase structure tree, when a continuous downward path can be traced from a node labeled A to a node labeled B, then A dominates B. Downdrift, the gradual lowering of the absolute pitch of tones during an utterance in a tone language. During the downdrift, tones retain their relative values to one another. Destructure, any phrase structure tree generated by the phrase structure rules of a transformational grammar, the basic syntactic structures of the grammar. Also called deep structure. See transformational rule. Dual language immersion, an education program that enrolls English-speaking children and minority language students in roughly equal numbers, with the intention of making all students bilingual. Dual language program, also known as two-way or developmental, the goal of these bilingual programs is for students to develop language proficiency in two languages by receiving instruction in English and another language in a classroom that is usually comprised of half native English speakers and half native speakers of the other language. Dyslexia, a cover term for the various types of reading impairment. Ear witnessing, the use of human listeners to identify an unknown speaker of an utterance, as opposed to speaker identification, which uses computers to achieve that end. Early Middle English vowel shortening, a sound change that shortened vowels such as the first I in criminal. As a result, criminal was unaffected by the great vowel shift, leading to word pairs such as crime/criminal. Ease of articulation, the tendency of speakers to adjust their pronunciation to make it easier or more efficient to move the articulators. Phonetic and phonological rules are often the result of ease of articulation. Example, the rule of English that nasalizes vowels when they precede a nasal consonant. Ebonics, an alternative term, first used in 1997, for the various dialects of African American English. Eclectic, there has been a move from teachers using one specific approach to teaching language. In this eclectic approach, a teacher decides what methodology or approach to use depending on the aims of the lesson and the learners in the group. Embedded sentence, a sentence that occurs within a sentence in a phrase structure tree. Example, you know that sheepdogs cannot read. Emoticon, a string of text characters that, when viewed sideways, forms a face or figure expressing a particular emotion. Example, 8 / to express dismay. Frequently used in email. English language acquisition, language enhancement, and academic achievement. ACT, the actual name for the Title III provision of the No Child Left Behind Act. This section deals specifically with the federal government mandates for school districts, nationwide, concerning LEP students. The mandates set forth what schools must provide these students. Entail, one sentence entails another if the truth of the first necessarily implies the truth of the second. Example, the sun melted the ice entails the ice melted because if the first is true, the second must be true. Entailment, the relationship between two sentences, where the truth of one necessitates the truth of the other. Example, Corday assassinated Marat and Marat is dead. If the first is true, the second must be true. Epenthesis, the insertion of one or more phones in a word. Example, the insertion of, in children. To produce, TLDRN, instead of, TLDRN. The process of inserting a consonant or vowel. Eponym, a word taken from a proper name, such as Hertz for, unit of frequency. Etymology, history of a language. Euphemism, a word or phrase that replaces a taboo word or is used to avoid reference to certain acts or subjects. Example, powder room for toilet, usually vulgar words, friggin', fudge, etc. Euphemism treadmill, the process whereby a euphemism takes on the taboo characteristics of the word it replaced, thereby requiring another euphemism. Example, cripple, handicapped, disabled, challenged. Event/eventive, a type of sentence that describes activities such as John kissed Mary, as opposed to describing states such as John knows Mary. See state/stative. Event-related brain potentials, ERP, the electrical signals emitted from different areas of the brain in response to different kinds of stimuli. Extensive reading. Learners read texts for enjoyment and to develop general reading skills. Intensive reading is reading in detail with specific learning aims and tasks. Some ways to encourage extensive reading is to set up a classroom, library, or dedicate some class time to quiet reading. Is simply done for enjoyment to develop general reading skills. Experiencer, the thematic role of the noun phrase whose referent perceives something, example, Helen. In Helen heard Robert playing the piano. The professor awakened the boy with his hand. Source. Experiencer, instrument. Extension, the referential part of the meaning of an expression, the referent of a noun phrase. See reference, referent. False friends, words that look or sound the same as words in the learner's first language but in fact are not so, causing the learner to make a mistake. They can be compared with cognates, which are words that are the same in different languages. For example, the German word gift means poison. Feature matrix, a representation of phonological segments in which the columns represent segments and the rows represent features, each cell being marked with a plus or, to designate the presence or absence of the feature for that segment. Feature changing rules, phonological rules that change feature values of segments either to make them more similar, see assimilation rules, or less similar, see dissimilation rules. Feature spreading rules, see assimilation rules. Finite verb, a finite verb shows tense, number, and mood distinctions. Finite verbs can happen in an independent clause. In the above sample, has, is finite or showing us the tense or the time that Mary was singing. In contrast, non-finite verbs are infinitives or participles. Finger spelling, in signing, hand gestures that represent letters of the alphabet used to spell words for which there is no sign. Flap, a speech sound in which the tongue touches the alveolar ridge and withdraws. It is often an allophone of /t/ and /d/ in words such as writer and writer. Also called tap. Folk etymology, the process whereby the history of a word is derived from non-scientific speculation or false analogy with another word. Example, hooker for prostitute is falsely believed to be derived from the name of the U.S. Civil War General Joseph Hooker. Forensic linguistics, a subfield of linguistics that applies to language as used in legal and judicial matters. Form, the phonological or gestural representation of a morpheme or word. Formal, a syllabus of the formal type would have knowledge focus on forms, systems and rules of phonology, morphology, vocabulary, grammar, and discourse as text. A functional syllabus would focus more on the social uses of language. A task-based and process syllabus would focus on meanings derived and created through unified systems of linguistic forms and interpersonal conventions. Formation of grammatical construction, there are many different human interactions that intercultural communication, how people understand each other across different cultures, has helped to identify. Some of them are conventional roles adopted by a culture, stereotypes that they have of each other. Nonverbal behavior, the way they save face and how they structure their discourse. The actual formal grammatical considerations are not related to understanding cultures.